Hello again. So in the last video, we learned how to use the Express module with Node.js. And we briefly touched upon routing and sending information, just as not sending files, just sending text as information, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to serve our static files so that we can actually serve our HTML pages. So if you remember from the previous Node video, you can ignore this. We had my Node app folder in which I had a public folder. That public folder had 3 pages and an image, and then we had a server that looked a little something like this. And we had to use a switch statement to be able to serve our files, and we had to serve our images individually. Now, I only had 1 image, so I only needed 1 of these for the image. And I had to tell it to serve the static file, tell it where the file was, and tell it what type of it was. Actually, this should have been JPEG. So let's, as a refresher, remind ourselves how this page looked. So if we, excuse me. If we go to our localhost, we see that our home page looked like this. We had our home about page, could go back to our home page, and any broken link would take us to this 404 page that we made. So we essentially want to recreate this behavior, but this time using Express. So what I've done is I went ahead and I created this new folder called Express Tutorial 2. I copied over my public folder, which has all of my HTML contents, and I copied over my server.js file, but not the one from the node, but the one that we just did with Express Tutorial 1, right? Since we already have all of that information here. And again, I recommend that you type it out every time for sake of practice. For the sake of this video, I don't want you to see me typing what we already typed before. So I'm just copying that info over. And I have here section 3.2 talks about routing, which I very, very briefly covered in the previous video. But something that I didn't cover was how do we do our 404 page. So for a 404 page, we can use a wildcard. So instead of having that switch statement and then having a default case, what we do in this case is we say, hey, anything else that should be in quotes, anything else that is not what we've defined here, you're going to say that that page was not found. Close this too early, that should go here. So let's see how this works. So I'm gonna kill the other one that I was working on, and I'm in my Express Tutorial 2 folder. And notice that we haven't done any of the HTML stuff yet, right? This is essentially the same one we had at the end of the previous video. I just added that wildcard for page not found. So let's run that server. We'll see that if we go to the home page, it's just going to say hello world. Again, if we go to about, it's going to say about page. And let's go to something else, page not found. So we figured out how to do our 404 page, right? So you just have that wildcard. And now what we want to do is we want to set up so that we can serve our files. So let's scroll on down here and to section 3.6, where we talk about serving static files. One of the nice things about Express is that we can say to look that there are static files that are stored in a folder, and to look in that folder if you don't find them in the current folder. So that's what express.static does. So again, from our previous server, every time we served a file, we had to explicitly write the entire location relative to where our server is of that image, right? So we had public and then about the HTML, public, image, and then the quetzalbill.jpg. With Express, we no longer have to do that because we're going to say, hey, if it's not in this same location, right? If I tell you to send a file and you can't find it in this same folder at the same level where my server is, I want you to look in this other folder called public. So let's go ahead and add that line of code. And the single versus double quote doesn't actually matter. I just want to keep it consistent, which is why you see me changing back and forth. All right, so now what this line is saying, look for static files to be served inside public folder. And now that we have this, like I said, we're not going to have to serve our individual image files anymore because Express is going to get the request for something like /image/quetzalbill.jpg, and it's going to say, hey, that image isn't here. Let me look inside this folder. Oh, hey, look, there's an image folder right there, and hey, look, the quetzalbill image is there. So that's one of the really, really nice things about Express, being able to say, hey, I don't want to serve it individually in my routes. Just go ahead and find it in this folder. And if you have multiple folders, you can do that as well. The other nice thing that you can do is, let's say you don't want, sometimes folder names change, and let's say you don't want to keep track of that. So let's say you just want to do this, right, where you get rid of the image name, but of course your image folder is still there. Then what you could do is you could also say, hey, and also look inside the image folder. And that way, if you were to change this from img to image or images, you would only have to change it in one spot, which is here, instead of having to change it in any HTML files where you have images. But this is totally up to you how you choose to do it. If you want to have the /image here and get rid of it here, you can do that. If you want to do it the other way around, that is fine too. So I'm just going to leave it like this. And now what we want to do is, all right, so let's see. So before we were sending this text, right? But now we just want to send our HTML file. So why don't we just try that? So this would be index.html. This would be about.html. And this would be 404.html. So let's go ahead and run our server and see if this works. All right, so I'll just refresh on this. So it should give me that 404 HTML file, and it doesn't. It gives me the 404.html as text. All right, so let's try our about. Okay, so seems something is off. Okay, well, perhaps we're using the wrong function, right? Because we were using send before to send just regular text. But now that we're serving files, perhaps we need a different function. So let's pull up the Express documentation. You can see I already have it linked here in my history. And we're working with the response, right? Like the response is what sends the information over. Oops, excuse me. So let's go into the response and see what functions we have. So we have send, which is what we were using, and it sends the HTTP response. So you can send HTML like this, you can send info like this. And here, look at that, we have a send file. We transfer the file at the given path, so its content type is true response based on the file name's extension. So look at that, it's doing all the work for us. We no longer have to set the content type because it just does it based on the extension. So let's try using this guy. So res.send file, and change these guys to send file. And let's restart our server and see if this works. Oh, all right, so we get that we need the root file to res.send file. So if we recall from previous video, we talked about dir name, not dar name, excuse me, dir name resolving to what the absolute path was relative to the current folder. So let's try this. Let's refresh. Okay, so it's not adding the slash and it's not adding the public. So let's fix this. It says I'm going to be doing this for all of our files. Let's go ahead and set a new variable called dir and set that equal to dir name plus slash public. And let's add the slash there. And let's now say dir plus about. So let's run this again. And now we get that about page. So let's do the same for these guys. So if we go to our home page, oh, this is trying to go to index, so it's giving us the 404 like it's supposed to. But this guy should give us this. All right, so let's add one more for slash index and run that again. So now we've got our working page. Awesome, and that's it. And again, the reason you need this is for other files such as CSS and images. If I were to get rid of this, you'd see that the image breaks here, right? Because it no longer knows where to look. It's looking for the image inside this out folder, which our image isn't there. So by keeping this guy, we say, hey, whatever files you don't find that aren't being directly served by us, go ahead and find them in that public folder. Right? Hope that was helpful.